Okay, it is 7 o'clock. Let's get this meeting started. It is a regular meeting of the Board of Directors on Thursday, May the 2nd. Well, it's a special meeting, actually, just to discuss the budget assumptions. And roll call, let the record show that 3 board members do have excused absences: Directors Oliphant, Pierce, and Bergstler. As far as the agenda goes, would anybody like to make any changes, additions, deletions, etc.? We're good to go. Seeing nothing, let's just approve the agenda as presented. Announcements?
Yeah, I'll mention one.
Microphone.
I was given information that leads me to think, because it was very specific information, that the county, or excuse me, I keep saying that the city is considering actually annexing Geneva, the Geneva UGA. Now, I was unable to verify that there's any active hearing going on. The rumor was that it was happening tonight. I could not find anything along those lines, city or county. However, the county's plan for annexation that they created a few years back, 2 or 3 years back, did indicate that they were planning on absorbing Geneva sometime in 2020.
Interesting, okay. I would like to see the rationale for doing that, because there is no industrial base there, no extra taxes to pay for it and everything, so.
It seems to me that there's very clearly a long process involved. There will be some public input. I know the last time they considered what to do with Geneva, they made specific note of the fact that the local residents aren't in favor of annexation.
Okay. I don't think it has much implication for Sun Valley, but except
It probably doesn't, although there is a question about whether expenses of the fire district would or would not be thrown onto our shoulders. Bellingham would take that.
The whole rest of South Rockville, as well as the water sewer district.
Yeah.
It's a negotiation that's got to take several years if they decide to do it.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
Anything else? Nothing else coming up? Okay. All right, property owner comments. Okay.
Want to go first? Good evening.
Name and address, please.
My name is Scott Walsh. I live at 51 Marigold Drive. And I didn't duck in time. So, anyway, I'm here tonight because I've been watching the meetings and whatnot, and I have to confess that I also have looked at some of the social media. And I know you're all here tonight. You're really in the eye of the storm. Bottom line is, I've decided that I would prefer not to see the dues raised. And I think that, we had a pretty hefty dues increase this last go around. And I just think it would be pretty difficult to take another dues increase the size of the one that we just experienced, and I just wanted to voice my opinion on that. Quite frankly, I would like to throw the challenge out to you that perhaps maybe you take last year's dues and see what you can do with that, and go for a year and maybe look back. Again, I don't profess to know anything about the budgets and stuff, but I have attended finance committee meetings. I have listened very carefully, and so anyway, tonight was a way to get out of the house and come down and just voice my opinion. So anyway, for what it's worth, I would like to see. And I'm sure dues may have to be raised in one way or another because of whatever, I don't know, ongoing costs are, but not one like this last time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, 15 Grandview, Waterman. We've seen a tremendous revitalization and resurgence of maintenance and repair work and new construction work over the last 4.5 years in the valley. And last year, the board very courageously took a stand and increased our dues 47%. Now, the membership did not vote in a overwhelming fashion. They didn't, in fact, have a majority that said, we want that to occur. They did, although, have a majority by a wide margin, 200 vote margin, where they voted in people who had advocated increasing dues. So I'm going to speculate that they were looking for people who would be intelligent and wise in how the money collected would be spent. I am a member of the Finance Committee. I am the past general manager. And I can say that when you look at how you're performed as an association, the best way to do that is looking back over your prior year. How did you perform? How did you spend the money? How did it come to pass? You can't really do it well as the year is unfolding, but you can do it very well when the year has closed. I would strongly urge the board to listen to, as we did at Finance, to all of the items that the association is asking for, and to say, do you or do you not believe that these are real and vital? But to actually restrain and say, let's not increase more than $2 a month in the next fiscal year. Let us go through a year, or perhaps two, of seeing how we do with this 47% increase that we have received. We have been able to cover a tremendous amount of cost in the last several years of things that were not in our budget. But we were able to cover them because we were fiscally conservative and we watched our dimes and our nickels and our pennies. We didn't watch our bucks because then the money gets away from you. I believe our new general manager is more fiscally aware than I was. I think he's a tighter financial control person than I. That's a strength of his. We have different strengths. I think it would be wise to hold the line at something in the neighborhood of $2. I know that there are issues coming up that are beyond the association's control. And so why go backwards and have to take from that 47% to draw down and pay for these things that are out of our control? But at the same time, let's, in a year from now, be able to look back and assess how did we do and what do we really need before we make any further attempts. The members are all going to receive a new tax, courtesy of the Water District, I believe.
No, it's a stormwater utility district. It has nothing to do with the water and sewer district.
Thank you for correcting me. They are going to receive a new tax?
Yes.
Maybe.
Okay.
That's not decided yet.
Okay, we're working on it. Okay, thank you. Go on.
I believe that we owe it to our members. If that's what's going to occur, let us not be that reason. I think it's wise for us to have some perspective in the correct proportion. Thank you.
Thank you. Board comment. Okay.
Protein.
Seeing nothing, let's move on to the body of this meeting. Continuing business and voting is necessary on the budget calendar. Carol, are you presenting this, or is?
Actually, we'll have Jennifer. She has worked with staff and so forth, and with Joe. So it's Jennifer. Sorry, Jennifer. Would you please go over the calendar with us?
Will you be asking us to vote to approve this?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
So tonight's meeting is on the schedule, and at the request of having shorter board meetings and budget-only meetings, I've set up this calendar for both finance and the board to have budget-specific meetings. So the blue dates are board meetings and the green dates are finance meetings. Those meetings where the font is in the color white, I don't anticipate that we'll have any budget topic at that meeting. And where the font color is black, I anticipate that there will be a budget topic and it's detailed over in the budgeting timeline. That means we'll have a couple extra finance meetings, one on the 29th of May, on the 11th and 12th of June, and the 19th of June is a regular meeting. It also means we'll have some special board meetings, and that would be the 26th of June and then the 10th of July, and if we have a regular board meeting on the 11th, so if...
I'm looking for the 26th of June on here, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, I apologize.
Middle, it's in there.
Oh,
It's
but
the
I
middle,
don't think I
Oh, I see you didn't
wrote
have
it
it on
out
the-
on the side. So I'll add that in, but on the
All right.
26th of June, the purpose of that meeting is to present the draft budget as has been presented to the Finance Committee by the managers with whatever changes the Finance Committee has requested.
Okay, so this is a finance committee item on.
So it's a new process and that Joe used at his prior facility. And the managers are gonna come first to the finance meeting over 2 days, the 11th and the 12th of June, to present their budgets, to save a lot of the back and forth that we've had in the past. And then on the 19th of June, we'll meet again with finance to finalize any changes that were made. And then we'll bring all those changes to the board on June 26th.
So that's a board item on the 26th.
That's a board item on the
Okay.
26th. And then the board will have 2 weeks to review that budget. Nothing will change in what's presented on the 26th versus what's presented on July 10th, where the managers will come on July 10th to the board meeting and they'll present their budgets to the board. If that meeting, if it should not be enough time to do it in one day, then we have the 11th as well, which is a regular board meeting to have any managers come back and answer additional questions or however that works out. And we'll be making live changes at the July board meeting to the budget. So if the board says, oh, I don't want this item, we'll be able to see what the impact of that is for the dues. And then after that is kind of back to our regular process of looking at what the dues are and the ballot measures and voting on those through the rest of July and August.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I have one.
Do you want to have a motion first?
Yes, we do need a motion.
Should we have a motion on this
All right.
first? Okay. I move that we accept the calendar as presented.
As
Amended
amended.
to the one
As
that-
amended because we
You
did.
have to
As
amend
amended
Right.
versus the June
We can edit the
26th
date,
draft
yes.
budget.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Eric?
I noticed
Excuse me,
that,
Eric, Madam President, notes? Somebody taking notes, our secretary is gone?
The staff will take notes from the recordings.
Okay, my apologies.
Make sure you speak clearly so that she can.
the 3rd of September is the day after Labor Day. You have measure materials to printer. Is that a little too soon since we want to send the stuff to the printer with board candidates that would not even be drawn until the 3rd?
So that, I discussed this with Lisa regarding the AGM calendar, and I think it's just to get the first draft of the ballot measures over to the printer, so that way we can have the ballot measures back to proof, and then the candidates will also be sent over, though perhaps not at the same time.
Okay.
But it always takes a little longer to proof the ballot measures.
Yes.
And if that is the day after Labor Day, that is the day that they are opened, and it's
Yes.
available by end of day, so it should be no problem. Other questions? Sarah?
Is October 2nd the board meeting? It's in blue, but it's red font. It looks like it's just a deadline, but I want to verify.
It is just a deadline, not a board meeting, correct?
Do we, question?
Andrew?
Do you want to add subject to change? I mean, this is a calendar, and I mean, if there's not a quorum, for example, at some of these finance meetings or something like that, this could, in theory, change.
You wanna make a change? Or is,
Well, I mean, part of it is I'm not sure why entirely we have to vote on a calendar, and if we are, then we might want to
Okay.
just state that it's subject to change.
basically it is, a lot of these items are finance and staff, et cetera, but in order for the board to make votes, we have to ensure that the other parties have done their, preparation work to bring it to us. So that's why I think that we're looking at the entire calendar.
I just want to make sure that the special board meetings get on everybody's calendar and that, and that people are available to come to those dates. And if you don't think that there's going to be a quorum, then, we can move the dates around. That's why I wanted to bring them forward to the board now, to make sure that people would be available.
Madam President, Eric, and then Larry.
Withdrawn.
Larry?
Yeah, maybe I missed this the first time around, so I apologize. Blue boxes with white letters in them, what does that mean?
So those are regularly scheduled board meetings, but I don't anticipate that we'll discuss any budget topic. So I just wanted to put all the board meetings on the calendar so people could, plug it into their phone and I could make sure I knew when the board meetings were for
Right.
my calendar.
So you're proposing special board meetings on those Wednesdays, essentially?
Correct, on the June 26th and the 10th. Those are the two special board meetings I'd be proposing.
Madam President, you're up.
Okay, I'm looking on here for the date when the board actually votes to approve the budget. What is that date?
So I believe that the board would be approving the budget on either the 10th or the 11th, depending on when the
Of July.
managers, of July, depending on when the managers finish up with their
That's too
presentation.
soon for us to approve the budget because we have to send out notification within 30 days.
That's correct. The new state law makes it very, very important that we calculate
Yeah.
the
that's-
board vote correctly to
Right,
allow an
exactly.
appropriate mailing period.
Now, we can do all of the pre-work,
Right, all of
but
the
the
ballot
actual
measure.
vote
Uh-huh.
cannot take place until probably August, sometime
Yes,
September maybe.
it's
Yeah.
sometime in August.
But we need to find that date.
August.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, then I will review with the N&E and get that
Okay.
date on here. So it looks like I have some additional work to do before it can be voted on.
Yeah.
But are these additional dates on June 26th and July 10th, are those good dates
Yes.
for board meetings?
Those looking all right?
I guess they'll have to be.
Okay. We gotta get it done.
Okay, and then I'll add on to the calendar.
Shall we move to table this until the next meeting so that we can get the final vote date on there correctly?
Great.
By acclamation,
Yes.
let's just
Yes,
do it.
by acclamation, okay. Okay, other than that, it looks good.
Great, thank you.
Okay, coming up to the budget assumptions. All right. We are not passing a budget tonight. We are looking at the guidelines that we are asking staff to use in creating this budget. Now, there's a big wish list right here, and I think that we need to look through and first of all, identify those items that are requirements. What are the things that we must do? And I'm looking at
Wage compression.
wages. Well, just wages increased by the state, that we must do that. I'm looking at increases in utilities. I'm looking at increases in insurance fees, et cetera, et cetera. And then we voted the Parks and Trails SGM, and we're required to increase that by 3%. And so, shall we just go and identify those items we must do first, and then go on from there? Okay.
Sounds good.
Fair enough.
So let me start that with saying on the first page, item number 2, the 3% increase to the rec department special assessment for the SGM. Is there any objection to including that?
Well,
That was voted
it
on.
has to be.
It's already-
That's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
is there anybody in this board who believes that we ought not to do that? Okay. The next one that I see as being required is the next page, number 5. The payroll, fair market wage is increasing to $13.50 an hour. Is any comments about our requirement to conform to state law to do this?
No.
Just that we have to do it.
Oh, yeah,
Madam
okay.
President, Sarah?
Okay, Sarah?
Just a comment, because tied into that is the benchmarking study or wage study for salaries and wages. So are you saying we approve that as well, or are you looping that in with A, or is I separate? One, I, whatever. Do you know what I'm asking?
So,
Yeah,
That makes any sense.
this one right here.
Yeah.
so
I agree with A, not the I below it.
okay, so, are there any further comments on that one? Larry?
Just the point that we're required to increase the payroll.
Absolutely.
We choose to do a benchmarking study. However, I would suggest that given the complaints that we yearly receive about the level of pay that staff receives, that it's time to do a good payroll study. So we're not voting on that or thinking
No,
about
we're
it
not.
at
I'm
the
just trying to
moment.
get, the consensus really of the board. Other comments on that? Carol?
I think that we definitely have to do the 1350. I think the 6,000 is a good idea, but it's not a necessity. I mean, if we were to look at the two of those, it's not a requirement by
Okay.
state law or anything, so much as I'd like to see it in, I
Okay.
think that is not a need to, absolute
Right.
need to.
So let's put that under the next category. All right, moving on to the next item that I am seeing as a requirement will be the next page, 5E, 15%, project 15% increase to current plan medical benefits for SVCA's insurance broker. Comments on that? Eric?
Is this something that the insurance broker actually advised us is to plan for? Or is this just a guesstimate based on?
It's a guesstimate based off of
Okay.
historical increases that we've had through the years.
But that guesstimate is from the insurance broker.
When do you start negotiating with the insurance broker?
Later in the year,
I want to say
September.
August, September.
Okay. Other comments?
Madam President, Sarah had her hand up? No.
Nothing? Okay.
I wouldn't see that as so much as a requirement, but it's something that needs to be negotiated.
Needs to be, okay, this is something to be taken into account as we are doing the budget, okay. I'll put that as a question. Okay, then, the next one, F, the employer payroll taxes, L&I and unemployment not projected to change as SVCA's experience ratio had decreased each year for the last 4 years. Washington state mandated employer portion of Washington paid family and medical leave tax starts in 2020. The premium is the gross wages times .004 times whatever of the whole thing. Anyway, it sounds like these are requirements.
Yes.
And the paid family leave, that's a new program that we can't say no to. Any comments?
Nope.
Questions? Okay. All right, that one
Seems like
stands.
it's required.
So then we'll look, again, this next one, number 6, Pacific Security. Projected 7% increase. Now, if we stay with them, that's something that we're going to find out when? What time of the year?
I'm not sure, Joe.
It is 7%. That has been.
It is 7%. That's what it will be.
Yes.
With Pacific Security. Okay, comments? Eric?
Our contract with Pacific Security, what's the term on that? How much longer do we have?
Renews annually.
It renews annually.
Yeah,
Okay.
the first of
And
the
so
year.
they've already advised us that it's going to be a
7%
7%
increase.
increase, okay.
Madam President, Larry?
I would like it noted that our rate did not increase last year.
Larry?
We are required to have security, but we're not required to do it by contract.
Right.
The difficulty I'm having is that some of the issues here need to be factored in. Would we save money by bringing in staff as opposed to continuing to have a contract? When are we going to have that kind of information? That may impact this 7%, it may not. I don't know. When am I going to be able to make that decision?
As far as the increase for 7%,
Well, the 7%, if we stay under contract,
Right.
that's a done deal. The
Done
question would be, are we going to stay?
are we gonna do it ourselves,
Bring it back in-house. Yeah.
back in-house? Right now, Norman and myself are working on that. I'm getting some information from other communities. I can tell you the facility I came from was $1 million a year
In-house.
in-house.
All right. Yeah, I think that we went to that for a reason. Carol?
I think we are now in May. The possibility of putting together an in-house security team and getting them trained and on board, and I don't think that's realistic to think we could get this done before our budget needs to be approved. I think we need to assume that we will keep them and that we need to deal with the 7% increase for this year. I know we've talked about this, and it seemed to me you said the earliest we could do anything would be January or even
2021.
later.
Yeah,
20 to 21.
2021
Okay.
would be a
Okay.
realistic.
All right, it's gonna take a long time to put this together, so.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for, and so I have no objection to the 7%.
I would say that 6A would be considered a requirement then.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, number 7, I think just about all of those budget projections include, and this is just information, utilities will increase 3%, property taxes will increase 3%, printing and copying for the views and coupons increases 5%, postage increase 5%, fuel increase 10%, raw materials increase of 10%, includes sand, gravel, landscape supplies, fertilizer, etc. Insurance up 2 to 9%, depending on the insurance plan per SVCA's insurance broker, and $50 per month for town square. Comments on those items?
They are what they are.
Eric?
Next, I believe it's next April would be when the contract for the views renews. It's a 2-year contract, if I remember right. And I know that they have a large increase in print paper because of the tariffs, which they're
Yeah.
already feeling the squeeze with. And so I don't know if the 5% is enough for the printing, the views.
We will double check, but Lisa contacted the Views Linden Tribune preliminarily, and they said 5% was what they would put in at this point in time.
Okay,
Though,
great.
Okay.
Okay.
but we will reconfirm that figure.
Thank you for doing that.
Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on to the next page.
So are
Madam
these-
President, is that going to be circled because yes, that's a yes?
A
We need that in our
requirement,
budget?
considered a requirement in our
Okay,
discussion.
which one?
Number
Seven,
7.
7 in its entirety.
Yeah,
Yes, right.
okay.
Okay, and then the next page, on page 6, 17, no changes for the budget. The 5,000 required regulatory plant mitigations, $3,000 vandalism, and ACC consultant costs of $27,500 or corresponding revenue of $35,000 is in new home construction fees equivalent to 10 new construction starts. So these are not anything that will make a change to the budget for next year. These are assumptions.
Okay. Madam President, could we go back to number 8?
All right, number 8 is project an average 3% increase to all golf expenses. Now, are you saying that this is a must-have, or, I mean, this is just a...
It seems to be no different from a good chunk of the items on number 7. Increased cost of business.
Okay.
It depends on what's in that.
No, I'm talking about things that are affected from outside of Sudden Valley. And to me, number 8 is we have control of that.
And in what sense? Because it says all golf expenses. Item 8A talks about advertising. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, we can consider advertising as a separate issue. But if all golf expenses are going up, such as sand and fertilizer and insecticide and whatever else, then we need to include that because that's part of the cost of doing business, is it
Okay.
not?
Okay, like I said, this is not being imposed on us by the state or the city or federal grants or anything like that, or a utility or something. This is what we have control over if we choose to spend money on it.
Well, I would only point out then that 7A is similar, utilities increase. We can control
Right.
the utilities.
Golf is not a utility.
No, but utilities are controllable by us. We can use less water if we want. We can cut down the electric bill if we want. We can do a lot of things
Okay.
there. If that is considered out of our control, then I would say the cost of sand and all other vital necessities for running the golf course are out of our control.
Sarah?
There's a 10% increase already included in 7F on raw materials, sand, gravel, landscaping, fertilizer, which is most of the cost we said. Other than that, as far as a general overall increase in golf expenses, there's not enough information on there, especially for me to say this is something we have to do. I would need a detail of what. I mean, the detail they give, specifically separating out as advertising costs, that's obviously completely controllable by us,
Yes.
depending on how much we want to advertise. But there's not enough information otherwise. There's definitely nothing that indicates this is something being imposed on us or that we have to do. And I think the piece about the product is covered on 7F.
Other comments? Eric?
I would say that it's not a requirement in the way that we're using that term.
Yeah.
And then I would suggest that we change this so that it doesn't say all golf expenses.
I'm sorry?
I would suggest that we change this item so that it is not confusing. It now says all golf expenses. My assumption was that all the materials spoken about on item 7 were materials as used by other departments. If those in fact include golf materials,
They do.
then the word all is incorrect and confusing.
Okay. I'm sorry, I've seen the word all. Oh, all golf expenses, okay, right there. Okay. All right, now to me, those are the requirements. And do you want to go back now to another category, or do we just start back at the beginning and look at the items that have not been discussed yet? Okay, back to number 1.
Are we just covering the operations budget right now? We're not going to do
Yes,
capital?
yeah,
Okay,
let's just
thank
look at
you.
operations. And this, again, these are assumptions. Per the 10-year plan and dues assessment prepared 9/6/2018, there will be an increase in operations dues and assessments. The amount of the increase is yet to be determined. Comments about that? Sarah?
I don't know what this 10-year plan is, so I'm hoping in a future meeting on budget, we can get details on that. But that's a really,
It's a very generic
it's a
statement.
very generic statement,
Yes, it is, yeah.
It's very generalized, and I think, with trying to do what we're trying to do in this conversation, which is talk about specific items, this is more of an overall idea of overall increase in operations, which is gonna depend on going through each of these items, so I'm
Yes.
not really comfortable
Yeah.
at all saying yes to that. It's too
Yeah.
general.
All I was trying to say is that the 10-year plan is presented to the board on September 6, 2018, printed in the board packet. There were 2 options, if you recall, to increase the dues 90% or to increase the dues the 47% that we chose. And the goal was that over the 10-year period, we'd bring in the same amount of capital funds by increasing the dues every year. In 2020, the projected dues increase would be 15% over 2019. And that was the plan that was voted on in order to fulfill the capital obligations over a 10-year term between the two options. And so that's all I was trying to reference there, was that plan, and that if all of these items that are in this budget assumption were fulfilled, then there will be a dues increase. It won't be funded with the current dues.
Yeah, okay, and I agree, there probably will be, based on what we have said already, is that there are mandated spendings that will increase the budget. Now, I would like to propose that we control that as much as we can. I mean, the things we've just gone over are kind of out of our hands. Now let's look at the things that we can control.
With that understanding, it makes sense to say that there is going to be an increase because there are things outside of our control. The 10-year plan and the reference to that, to me, is confusing because my understanding of the 10-year plan, both road and surf, was that that's all capital stuff, and we're not talking capital right now.
The plan
Other
was
than these-
operations, roads, and capital.
Yeah.
That was presented to the board.
Carol?
There was a 10-year plan put together to give people an idea, but we made it very clear when we were voting and making decisions last year on the budget. The budget that we voted on last year was only for 2019.
Right.
So the 10-year, and we made it very clear, the 10-year plan, so to speak, was just kind of an example of what a 10-year plan might look like, because people were asking us, well, what are you going to do over the next 10 years, worried about, huge increases in dues, and we were trying to allay those fears somewhat. But it wasn't anything we voted on. It was just the 2019 budget was what we voted on.
Eric?
Two things. Now that we've identified the required issues, it would be good for us to know what that would be reflected in with respect to a dues increase, just to meet the required, what we've determined are required issues.
Okay, you want numbers now? Is that what you're saying?
I think sooner than later. I know that Jennifer's probably got it off the top of her head right now.
Yeah.
But
There's a spreadsheet somewhere.
But no, I don't think that right now would be reasonable to know those numbers.
No, we
but-
can't know those right now.
But I would like to know what's
saw the
required,
data coming.
and then what we are talking about now would be obviously our priorities that are on top of that.
Right. And that is what we're doing right now is not actually working with those numbers, but
Right.
giving the guidelines to staff and saying, here's, what we believe you must do.
Right.
And then with some kind of general guidelines for the rest of it. And to me, this number one, that there will be an increase, I grudgingly will say, yes, there will be an increase because we're required to do certain things. And what that increase will be will depend on the total set of assumptions that we do make.
Madam President, Sarah?
I
apologize, you
still
did have two.
continuing. And as far as 1B goes, we're not ready to evaluate that.
No, that I think 91% collection rate is it's been a comfortable number for quite a while now.
Well, this year, it was this year. The years before, it's been 94. And
Well, yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
93, I'm sorry. So it was 90, yeah. So, but I think Jennifer's correct in this. We need to wait until at least June. We've only had a few months now, and we're at 94% right now, which is great.
Yeah.
But we should
So
wait
number one is
and give ourselves a little cushion, yeah.
Okay.
Madam President, Sarah, you done?
No, just to continue that question.
That's three.
No, I got,
Just ask
I
it.
got interrupted.
Keep going.
Well, that being the case, and we have the things that are required, and we know that will cause some type of an increase, I would like us to proceed with the idea in mind that we look at what we have been able to do with what we have this year. And I don't know that we even have been doing that for long enough to evaluate.
Okay.
Madam
Should we
President,
go- should we go on with the list?
just-
Because it's just, yeah.
Madam President, Sarah,
Okay, Sarah?
Okay, I guess I just have a big problem with how we've done this whole thing. We're just coming off of a huge dues increase, and we have a lot of additional funds available in specifically operations to cover things. So this is talking about all the wants, and we just went through kind of the required increases. What's not on here is potential places we could decrease the budget to compensate for these places that are increasing so that we don't have to increase the budget. All this is a list of, we want to increase the budget in the following areas. So I guess what I don't really understand is, we don't have numbers, we just have general ideas, and we don't have any pieces of the other side or total picture of the budget of, okay, if we increase here, we could potentially cut here, because this is just little snippets, kind of a summary overview of pieces of the budget. I don't really feel like I can have a very thorough discussion on this without being able to mitigate it against something. For instance, I might be in favor of increasing something if we could decrease something else to compensate for that increase.
Madam
Or
President,
another
Larry.
object?
I'm not going to disagree with that assessment, but I will say that it's incomplete, because some of the further lists down here under operations all talk about increases in income. If income goes up, that will reduce the need to offset by reducing expenses. So it's a total package that we have to take a look at. And I think it therefore would be a little premature to start talking tonight about where we're going to cut, because we haven't even begun to talk about where we're going to increase income.
Yeah, we're, it's a moving down.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, right.
Madam
Okay.
President Carroll.
And actually, coming up next is the first area where we're going to get some increase in revenue. Is there other comments on the?
Carol.
Just so you know that the Finance Committee did ask staff to ensure that the managers, when they come to, because the managers are going to present, and the reason we don't have numbers yet is you can't put together a budget until you have some assumptions in place. I mean, Jennifer doesn't know where to start until she knows the kinds of things that we're going to have to fund. And so it's up to us to start to say what we think is helpful and what is not. And once we start to see those numbers, then we can make decisions about priorities and so forth, and what does and doesn't get approved. But we've asked the department managers to come prepared to give us ideas about things that they are doing in their departments to reduce or keep expenses lower, so that we have a full picture of what each department is doing. So we should start to see that as they present.
That's included as item 18.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next, item number 3 is the Marina Area Z income, and we are looking at increases, proposed increases in both of those areas. Neither one of them have changed much in the last several years, and it's time. Any agreement on that?
Well, I would certainly agree to that. I'd like to have some, just on this piece of paper, I know it's listed on all of the income statements for all of the years, what we earned in these areas, but it'd be nice to just have a reference number here. If we get a 10% increase, that's going to result in X dollars of income.
Well, again, these are guidelines with.
I totally understand, but at least it helps my thinking if I'm looking at numbers at all. It just would be useful.
Okay.
What does, Jennifer, if I might ask, a wet slip cost somebody what now?
A wet slip, dry slip combo is the most common, and I believe it's around
Say it's like $1,100, $1,200.
$1,200
Okay, thank
a
you.
year.
And
We
I-
are the only
Have
marina
8, right.
on the lake. Well, there is another small private marina, but you purchase the slip outright, and then the association receives no further funding from that slip ever.
Madam President, Sarah.
It would also be good to have a comparison between other places where you can get wet slips and here, as well as storage areas like areas A, when you come to doing the actual budget.
Yes, we plan on presenting that information.
Okay. Sarah?
I think specifically, especially in the marina with the wet slips, because we're kind of the only game in town, we could do more, quite a bit better than 10%. We haven't increased since 2010. That's a huge amount of time. And it's a high, it's a commodity people don't have. We always sell them out. There's never any open wet slips. People will pay to put their boat there. This is an area where we can make more money for sure, and I think 10% is low.
The plan will be 10% next year and 10% the following year.
Okay. Okay, Larry?
I appreciate that plan. What's the analysis to the impact on the market, given that I tend to agree with the comment that we are in the catbird seat, so to speak. So what was the analysis of the market that led you to say 10% this year and 10% next year, as opposed to 15 and 5 or 15 and another 15?
10 was just a number that I felt was a decent number to move it. Originally, I could move it 20% one year. I don't want to scare everybody away. So you do gradual increases to get to a number that is more market based. Because like Sarah said, it's been 2010 since anything has gone up. And we are the only game in town.
It would be nice to see what.
Okay, I'm sure that the staff will bring that to us when they bring the budget.
Right,
Yeah.
when managers present that, you'll see the market analysis for all the other marinas.
If you will recall, some 10 years or so ago, we did put a significant increase onto the marina and lost people. So it's,
We've got to be
We gotta wait,
cautious,
yeah.
whatever we do. Yeah.
right. Okay, golf income. Let's see. We have increased the fees for golfers this year. And what this seems to be talking to is committing to increasing marketing and increasing play, which will bring in more revenue, as well as selling the product. And to me, this is just a kind of a, yeah, we should do that. Is there anything here that somebody has a problem with?
Not I. I want to see the golf course utilized and as profitable as possible.
Sarah?
I think a really useful analysis or piece of information here would be, I know we brought in the additional golf professional, golf pro. Oh yeah, professional just sounds better.
Yeah, that's a word.
Pro sounds
Yeah.
better. It would be interesting to know how much our revenue is increased versus how much we're paying for that new position. Because the idea of bringing in was that they would pay for their salary plus some. That we would actually net out making money by that, by bringing in this additional person, and we can have the other one freed up for these larger group events that we do make money in. So I would really like to see a comparison of those two things. We can evaluate, was that a good plan? And does it make sense to continue down that road, which some of this other stuff talks to?
I think that's a good ROI to learn for when they present the budget. Here's what we're presenting, and here's the reason, here's how much we have made by doing this, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that since we've only had this extra staff person for a brief period of time, I think it may be a little premature to make a determination that, no, it's not paying for itself this year. Golf is historically a slow-moving enterprise. You lose players over time and you gain them back over time. And the marketing effort hasn't really had that much time. So I would want to be cautious in how we use those numbers, but I'm interested in seeing those numbers.
Yeah. Carol?
I was just going to say, this was a conversation we had at the Finance Committee, and I think Brian will be very ready to speak to that issue. We've asked him to detail what his anticipation
Yeah, we'd
is,
like-
and I know it takes 7 years sometimes to develop background and tournaments and that sort of thing, so he's working on those.
Okay. Okay, coming to our first challenging item here. 5B, recommending adding 1.5 FTEs to maintenance. How are we feeling about adding any FTEs at this time? Mike?
Well, Madam President, I'd like to have the general manager tell us exactly what's gonna happen with this 1/2, is it a half person?
1.5.
1.5 persons. Where are we needed?
Generally, what happens here at Sudden Valley, you go, during the summer, you go into vegetation control, and that leaves me one full-time person to take care of Sudden Valley. The plan is to increase that so that all the day-to-day general maintenance still can be done. With the new work order program, that will, as that's getting into place, you'll be able to see, track better hours, projects, and everything through. But right now, you are down to one person starting next week.
Thank you. Madam President, Larry?
What are we not going to be able to do? And you may not be able to tell us tonight. That may be something that you want to talk about earlier. For me, it's a little early to say yes or no on this. Clearly, over the years, we've needed far more maintenance than we've been able to conduct. So in theory, I would say 2.5, but this is, an issue of going as slow as we can possibly get away with. So what are we not taking care of that you would want to see and expect to see taken care of by this extra 1.5?
Okay. Fair enough.
My other question is, you're talking specifically about inability to do work in the summertime. Is this a new person to be hired year-round, or are these
It'd be,
3.5 people during the summer?
it is, for the maintenance alone, it is 1.5. So it'll be a half person during the summer and a full person year-round.
Okay, but the people who are working on roadside swales and all of the vegetation work that we do would not be doing that in the winter, and they could be working on regular maintenance.
It's, you have stuff that falls short here. I will use the clubhouse, for example, right now. If you happen to walk up on that, it's probably been 2 weeks since it's been hit with a blower. They just don't have the staff.
Yeah, no, I understand summertime. I just, thinking about, do we want this full-time, full year, or just summer? So, other comments, Eric? I'm sorry.
Actually, this is a number I think Jennifer would have in reach. For a one full-time maintenance person, fully weighted, would that be on the order of, what, $1.70 a month per member?
I don't have that information with me.
Okay. Let me say for myself, I would really need to be convinced that we need to hire anybody. I would like to know exactly what they're doing and exactly how much it's going to cost and what's going to not get done if we don't hire them. Okay?
Agreed.
All right. So now we're coming down, that's B, and then another 1 FTE for janitorial. My comments are the same on that. And then D, 1 more FTE to support capital permitting and grant writing, et cetera. This whole section, I'm not seeing enough meat to convince me right now.
For
Comments?
janitorial, okay.
Mike?
The only, going to D, on the full-time person to write grants, et cetera. We've not had that before. Trying to figure out how this idea would have originated.
Part of it is the direction that we're going forward with the use of Wilson Engineering. We are slowly starting to put all the bids, everything out to bid, whether it's construction or engineering or permitting. So we are slowly moving away from a sole entity and putting it out to everyone, out to bid. And if we can get someone in-house to do permitting, it will save us some money, having it in-house, and they can also write grants. We had a grant writer out east. I got $400,000 and it cost us $75,000 for stormwater mitigation.
What do you know about getting grants that we haven't been able to do before?
You're not allowed to because you're not a municipality, so
That's right.
you would partner up with the sewer and water district or
With
DOE.
any entity who is able to get a
Yes,
grant?
you partner up with them. That's how we did it. We wrote it with Wayne County Conservation District, Wallenpaupack Water District. I mean, there was other districts and other municipalities in the areas that we were allowed to pony with to get grant money.
Okay.
Madam President, the hands are just flying now.
Yeah, I think.
So
Carol-
let's start
I think it
with
was
Carol, then we'll go to Sarah.
Yeah.
We'll skip Larry, but we'll go back.
Okay, Carol?
I think it would help us to, I heard the value of this when we were talking about it at the Finance Committee, because, oh my gosh, if we could save on permitting even, it would be heaven. But I think it would help us to hear what is going to be the lead time on, if we make this investment, how long will it be before we start to see a return on that investment? In other words, would we see it in 2020, or are we going to have to wait 2 or 3 years? I think that will help in making that decision, because that would be a tough one. Thanks.
Madam President, Sarah.
I'm against this position for 2 reasons. One, permitting is not a full-time job. We don't have enough capital projects going all the time that would be a full-time job. So then they would be filling their time with grants. We've talked about grants before, and we've basically been told we're not going to get them. Obviously, we're not a municipality. It's not that easy. There would be a huge lead time to what Carol's talking to, because you would have to establish those relationships to then become part of their grant, to find out what grants they're writing. You'd have to become a sub-recipient with them. They would have to trust you to do the reporting requirements. I mean, there's a whole piece of this that we would have to develop in a relationship that would take time. We would see no return on this for at least a couple of years while we cultivate that relationship. And I just don't see us being in any position to do that. I want to invest money in something that we can have immediate results from.
Madam President, Larry.
Yeah, I would just simply add that another task for this individual is something that I think we could pursue a lot more aggressively. I noted on a CAI conversation board recently that a large community in Henrico, Virginia, has been very successful in getting projects paid for by the county, by the local utilities, and I'm just wondering if those are available at some places in the country, they might be available here too, and that's something that we should start going for. They're not necessarily grants. They're just a cooperation agreement. I don't know if you guys did that further
No,
north.
we didn't, there was no cooperation agreements in Pennsylvania. It was
Okay.
either grant or you paid for it yourselves.
Yeah, it may be something
It might be
that's-
just state by state.
It may be state by state. I don't know, but it's something that we haven't yet looked at.
into.
Anyone else? Okay, so I sense a little discomfort with the whole new FTEs. That's going to have to be a big sell, if at all. Coming down to one that we kind of glossed over, Under the Pacific Security contract, we did look at the 7% increases as one of the probably necessary ones. And then item B is recommended adding $4,500 for one additional security guard in December for the holiday package patrol and related fuel expense. We've been actually doing that for the last couple of years, and it has been very successful in preventing thefts of packages from people's front, wherever they've been delivered. And yes? Or-
Just a question, it obviously had to get paid out of somewhere. Where did it get paid for?
It got paid out of extra dues collections for the year. So the
so
funds
we-
were not requested at a UDR, but we collected at a higher percentage than what was budgeted for the last several years.
And then,
If we projected 90%, they collected actually 96%.
Right.
There's extra money in operations to take care of things like that.
yeah, of course, and that's, desirable. You want to do that to the extent that is reasonable. I guess then, however, what is the rationale for adding that in specifically as a funded line item, as opposed to continuing what we've done in the last few years? 2 years, actually.
To ensure that it occurs if we don't do better than budget.
Madam President, Sarah.
Okay, Sarah?
I guess something like this kind of brings me to, it would be really useful to see what, with this big dues increase we're just coming off of, what we're funding with it, that we can't come up with $4,500 to allocate towards this. We have a spending plan, we reallocate as needed. Obviously, as you're talking to, like with the additional dues collections. It seems unreasonable that we've come off a big dues increase and we can't fund $4,500 towards this. And I guess I just really want to see what we've allocated those additional dues towards to see that they're really not addressing these specific needs.
Just a point of information, in 2019, we have a budget. The board has not adopted a spending plan. We simply have overages and underages in a budget.
Okay. To me, I think it's just a recognition of what we have been doing, so that we know that we've done it more than 1 year. So I think it should have its own line item.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
I said I think it should have its own line item since we have actually done it for more than 1 year. Okay, coming down now to a whole series of recommended items. Number 9, recommend adding $29,000 for recycling services. Now, we've had this discussion before about the increase in recycling that's happening, and do we want to take up for recycling or not?
I'm wholeheartedly in favor of recycling. I am also wholeheartedly in favor of doing it as cheaply as possible. Is there some way to limit the recycling to glass, aluminum, and paper, and somehow cut costs that way and make sure that we're doing the separating any way at all to reduce the amount that this is set at? Is that possible?
Well, anything's possible. We can set it up. I imagine we can do that in-house to set it up to separate, but I mean, we can do anything. This was you had something given to, I had this given to me, you put in $5,000 for recycling this year, and it wasn't even close.
Right.
It wasn't, you could hardly get anything out of that for a year, so.
Mike?
Madam President, Director Birchler is kind of a
Yes.
champion in this. Suggest kind of putting this one aside until she gets back.
Doing what? I'm sorry.
Put this one aside until she gets back, so, because I know
Yes,
that,
I'm thinking about what she has said in the past.
right, and
And-
if you read and listen to the news, they're talking about the fact that now municipalities are going 75% to garbage and,
Right.
and kind of pretending that they're doing 25% over here, but they're,
Exactly.
then they say that 25% is actually 15 more going into garbage, so that's,
Yeah.
it's narrowed down. So it's a difficult, I think everyone wants to do
Right.
this. So we need a little more, we need a little bit more information.
And I agree with that. If it's gonna go in the garbage anyway, there's no sense paying this to, separate it out. So let's,
Madam President, Sarah has her hand.
let's,
Just remembering back to what Paula was saying in the discussion we had about this last time, where she said like 2% of what you actually recycle goes to recycling. $29,000 is a lot of money to pay for 2% of that to go.
agreed. And we pay for garbage pickup, so that would be sufficient to, instead of this whole item, okay.
So is that
All
a
right, so we're-
rejection, or is that a rejection, or are we going to get more info?
Well, what that is we can speak to Paula at the next meeting, and without some compelling reason, I tend to reject it.
Madam President, I think we could also get, I believe SSC has like 98% of the pickup in Southern Valley, if not 100.
Yeah.
But we could also have them give us a little bit of an update as to what they feel the market is going to be in 2020.
Yeah, that's true, we just need more information. Okay, lacking any further information, I would suggest we reject it, but if we can find something, some reason to do it, talk to me. Carol?
I'm not suggesting one way or the other on these, but I think that we can say we reject it, but I don't know that we have enough information right now to reject anything. I think it's good information for staff to take back to the managers, that this is one that needs a lot more of a marketing job before we would approve it. So I would hate to vote on this and say, well, we reject this, because we may get more information later that says, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. Right now, it doesn't sound like it makes sense for us to spend $29,000 on a recycling based on what we've heard, but,
I
and
move
so
we
I would
table
say.
this until we get more
Yeah,
information.
that particular one, well, I don't know if you even need to table it. I think we have it. The department's managers are gonna come and present to all of this.
We don't need a motion.
This is really just giving them information about the areas that are ones that we're not as likely to approve unless we have a totally different story. That's all.
Fair.
Okay. Okay, moving forward, number 10, recommend GM discretionary funds increase from 4 to 7,500. Talk to us.
I'm sorry, I believe we skipped item 8 specifically on golf advertising.
I can't hear you.
I believe we skipped item 8 specifically on golf advertising.
Oh, okay. I think that what we had asked for on that one was more information, a kind of a feel for how much extra are we paying to have the main pro, as well as, doing, being the golf director, doing all of the marketing. What's the return on investment on that?
Great,
So
thank
we
you.
want- Yeah, okay. Number 10, the GM discretionary fund, comments?
Over the last few years, this number has fluctuated up and down through the years. The funds are used for employee appreciation, whether it's a lunch or gift cards, things of that nature. So some years it was up as high as 10,000, some years it was down as low as 2,000. And it seems like every year that I could see you going over your budget.
Okay,
Madam
so this is
President?
to account for historical expenditures, okay.
Yes.
Comments?
Madam President, Sarah.
I think that this is a really hot topic button in the community, this specific line item. I know there was a lot of comments, might have been last year, or it might have been 2 years ago, about some of the stuff that was in there, yeah. So I'm extremely hesitant to up this from 4,000 because of that. I think people are still dealing with and getting comfortable with the big dues increase we just came out of. And if you add in budget for things like this, it's going to just heighten people's level of discomfort.
Madam President, I think that Larry has his hand up.
I was thinking about it, but I'll take it.
Right.
Yeah, I think 75 is too much. I don't object to some increase because we have been going over. Well, if we've been going over, that we should either be strict about what we're budgeting and not go over, or we should recognize what we are going to spend and budget for what we do spend. So I don't mind increasing it, but I also urge that we hold to whatever that number is.
Okay, and I just have a question, and that is, if it were set at $7,000, that winds up being $2 per year per member for employee recognition.
Not much.
I'm not, I have no objection to that. Okay?
So
Okay.
where are we at?
Carol?
Again, I think this is a debate once we know the amount that it is right now. I'd like to see perhaps a little bit more information about how it was spent last year. But having been in HR for 20 years, I know the value of small rewards. It's huge compared to increases in salaries and that sort of thing. It's amazing how much a little thank you can do to an employee. And, I don't know how much of this is for employee recognition. I think there are other things that get done. It's meetings, it's meals and so forth. And so it's like when I don't know for sure, but for instance, when we had the maintenance people out doing snow plowing at 4:30 in the morning, having a lunch for them at noon. I mean,
That is included in that,
you
yes.
cannot imagine what that does to their morale and how that keeps them loyal to us. And believe me, we are not what I would call the prime employer. I mean, we don't have a retirement plan, we don't have 401k, there are a lot of things we don't have. And so I think the amount of this, if we could get a better idea of what we're really spending and what it's going for, I would have no problem, as you say, to see it raised as long as it is done for those kinds of things. So it's a small amount, $2 a year, yeah, per person. To keep employees, it's much more expensive to have to replace them and retrain them.
Okay, number 11 is recommend $50,000 for snowstorm expense in 2020. We saw how much it cost us this year.
109.
And if we looked at the numbers, we saw that it has been set at about $15,000 the last several years. Just the materials alone have exceeded that. And so we can take this amount and plan ahead, and if it is not used for snow this year, put it in the bank and use it next year, because eventually it will come. Larry?
The only way we can do that is if the board isolates that funding and specifies that unused amounts remain in a special account, or at least a special line someplace on the books, so that it doesn't get raided for other purposes. Because otherwise it would be totally available to the next board to do with as they please.
Yeah, we do have an emergency operations fund, which is dedicated to emergencies, and perhaps setting up a snow emergency fund would be the appropriate thing to do.
I like the idea, as long as we make sure that it doesn't get
Right,
frittered away elsewise.
frittered.
Madam President Carroll.
I think this is a luxury for us to set aside $50,000 when we seem to have snowstorms once every 3 years. Now, I will probably hate myself if we start having them every year to this degree, but this was a once in a decade. From past experience, we typically spend between 20 and 30,000 in a snowstorm year, and there are some years we have very little at all. I think it's a lot to set aside and not spend, and ask the membership to invest and put in a separate little account in the event that we do have one. And the only reason I feel comfortable saying this is because we do have UDR. And so far, UDR has funded these kinds of things when we have needed it, and we still have $200,000 in UDR even after we paid for the snow this year. So I think in future years, if we're, we're a little bit more flush and we have more funds to spend, it would be great for us to put aside 50,000, but I'm feeling more like 15 to 20 is a more reasonable amount because that's closer to a typical snowstorm. So just my thought on that.
Larry?
I'll just respond a little bit to say, yeah, maybe the 50 is too much, but it would be nice to know, okay, what was the actual expense over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and what's the average of that? And, does that justify 50? Does that justify 30? What does it justify? And assuming that long period average will be repeated in the future, similar long period. There is no guarantee on that, but yeah, maybe 50 is a bit much.
Oh, Mike?
But I think that can be resolved if we don't box it in with emergency snow as the line item.
I'm sorry, leaning a little closer to the microphone, please. Thank you.
I think that can be resolved if we don't box it in by putting an emergency snow fund as a line item. If you stipulate X amount in there for snow removal and we don't use it and it's not boxed in, it can still be used someplace else
Yeah.
if need be. But don't box it in if you're worried about the 50 then.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm more comfortable, as I say, down around 25, because, as I said, we have spent more than 15, closer to 20,000 a year, just on materials alone. So if we make it 25, then you have some manpower to shovel the snow along with all of the product that you're going to put down on the street.
If you give me a second, I can tell you what you spent the last 4 years.
I have it right in front of me.
But he's got the calculator.
I think it averages 42. They will. Yeah, they'll have to.
You're $52,382.50.
Including the average over the last
4 years.
4 years.
And that's including this last bad
Yep.
year. Okay?
Yeah.
So there was a comment, which I'll repeat, which was, maybe we shouldn't let this last bad year skew the average. Can we get an average?
I agree with that, yes.
Or can we get a different average
Hold on.
then?
If we'd gone
Give me a
back
second.
10 years. Yeah. Pull out the outlier.
$33,310.
There we go.
Okay. So 30,000 would be a good number to let accumulate? Okay,
I think so. I would certainly agree with that, 30,000, yeah.
okay.
Historically, the amounts unspent from one year to the next do not roll over, with the only current exception being the special assessment, as the membership voted that in.
Okay, we're talking about a special account then, such as the Operations Emergency Fund. So can we make a special snow fund, a snow emergency fund?
So the board wants to set up a new bank account and then separate from operations just to manage snow?
No.
He's against it, and I'm not, since we're reducing the number and relying on UDR as we have in the past, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay,
Thank you.
so if we're putting it down to 30 and then just, yeah, okay, assuming we're using that much each year. Okay,
Now, a quick question about the calculation of the snow. In 2016, we're only noting $356 in payroll for the entire $27,000 event, whereas the other years we're at $37,000 or $45,000 in payroll.
I don't believe we tracked payroll separately in that year.
Okay, but the numbers that we were calculating are based on the $356 payroll.
Yes, they are.
So it might be a little lean, this number.
30, you think?
Yeah.
it's a reasonable comment that he's made, and we're just throwing, why don't we get better data and make a better informed decision later?
Yeah. Okay. Reggie?
Take the last 7 years, throw out the high and the low, and then take your average.
Unfortunately, we only have data going back to 2015. When E&B Associate was here, they really did a bad job with the books. And I don't have any comparatives beyond 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise I'd agree with him.
But exactly. Yeah, otherwise, 7 years would be
Okay.
great.
So, again,
All
I
right.
suggest
And so I
that we
would-
get some better numbers.
I would say that the staff present us with a budget in the neighborhood of 30 or so, and you look back at whatever information you have and justify the number that gets put in there.
Will do.
Right? Okay. And then I have, on the same line, 11A, there is this note at the end that says $5,068 in storm response tree removal. Now, what is that about? It has nothing to do with snow removal.
Great. Was it 2018, we had a giant storm in August? And that was very expensive, over $30,000. And so for the 2019 budget, a line item, $15,000 or $20,000 was put in originally. And then it was cut down to $5,068 to balance the budget. That would be what it takes the budget to balance dollar figure. And so overall for emergency response, there's $20,068, $15,000 of which is budgeted in snow and $5,068 of which is budgeted in storm response. Though since we haven't gotten to the windy season and it's already been a very windy year, I imagine that we're gonna have some more storms in August to eat up that $5,000 in tree removal by the end of the year.
Why was it not included down here, number 14, with the hazardous tree removal?
It was just segregated out as a separate line item because it's like for a storm, supposed to be for a
This is not a regular
storm.
thing, this is an
emergency
A
situation.
related situation.
weather-related situation.
Okay,
So you could add it into number 17 as an item that wouldn't change, or, I don't know if that's something that you wanted to include going forward, a storm response tree removal line, but it was segregated out as its own line item in 2018.
okay. So
Madam
this,
President,
yes, no,
Somebody else, Ann.
Rich, and then Carol.
I think the storm she's talking about are trees that are down. Just keep that in mind. And the hazardous trees are those that are potentially going to come down that you need to grade and take care of ahead of time before they are laying across the road
yeah.
or in somebody's roof or car.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we want to treat this? Do we want a separate hazardous line for trees?
I have a question. Carol was first.
Carol?
I just want to further explain that. The difference between the hazardous tree fund that we have is that the board typically gets a slew of trees all at once that we approve for removal. And it's a little bit of a lengthy process. In other words, it's not going to happen for a couple of weeks once we get a bid and all of that goes on, and then we approve the funding. The hazardous or the storm response fund is at the discretion of the general manager and maintenance crew to be able to go out and do it like immediately and not wait for the board to approve it.
Yeah.
So it's a different, that's why it's in a different fund. It's treated, the money is spent a little differently because it's an emergency and we don't have time to, take care of it. The same as snow removal. We don't have time to say, okay, yeah, send out 3 guys to snowplow. Got to do it now.
Madam President, Larry.
The question I had was, my understanding was that that 50,000 that was originally in that particular item, 11, included storm response for tree removal. Is that correct? Because it says storm or snow/storm, and then explains further that you had two separate items, 15 in snow and a little over 5 in storm, which makes 20, and I thought that meant you increased it to 50. So is that two separate items or one combined item?
The snow is for snow only. That was what I based that number on, knowing that the 5,000 was still there for storm response.
Okay, so in fact, there are really two items that we're considering. One was the original 50, now maybe 30-ish for snow, and only for snow. And then we're talking maybe another $5,000 thereabouts for trees. That's good to know.
Okay.
So therefore, that makes it 35.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving to 12, the increase to membership special events from 12.5 to 15. How are we doing this year, and why are we projecting an increase?
The increase, as the community does more and more things, the cost of that is going up. Right now, we have on the docket, we're going to do the bite again. We will do the 4th of July ceremonies. So that's,
These are two big expense items.
two big expense items, yeah.
Okay.
Fishing derby, we got out of that this year, but that'll be something that we'll be looking at to do again going forward, working with Azam next year. She kind of spearheaded that this year.
Okay. Other items, the other big one, Breakfast with Santa, basically, that is done through donations, and Sun Valley doesn't pay a lot of money for that. We have flea markets, we have other things which are basically not high expense items. It's just facilitating member get-togethers. Comments?
Just a question, a bunch of questions, actually. Do we charge anything for the flea markets, to vendors in the flea markets? I thought we did, but it was very small. And therefore, the second question is, can we consider actually charging admission or higher rental fees to the flea market vendors to offset some of these expenses?
That might be difficult because the flea markets are held outside.
Well, yes, and they're still, you need to arrange to get a table and a spot.
Yeah, no, they pay rent for the tables, okay? But admission, that becomes a problem.
Admission to any of these big events could be a problem, but it can also be controlled. I mean, we've thought about controlling the 4th of July, and if you're going to control the 4th of July to keep out bad fireworks, you can also say, and they cost you $5 to, or whatever. Is that just completely off the table? That was my question.
I don't think that it's off the table. The board of directors can decide that they want fees charged for people that come to events, but I was looking through some historical views from 1974, 76, and 75, and I saw pictures of the fishing derby and the 4th of July party and how it was free to members, and this is included with your dues, and what a great thing it is that we have all these events. And so, I don't think that that's something Sudden Valley has ever charged for, and I guess that they could make that change going forward, but it seems like it's such a benefit to the community to be able to host these events and not charge for them. I mean, in my humble opinion, that they might not want to. But if you do, then we can project that as well.
Right. The only comment I would say is maybe we need to look harder at charging non-residents than we have looked in the past.
How much work for how much gain?
It totally depends on what it takes, and I don't have that information in front of me right now.
Carol?
Concern I have with that is, how do you monitor it? You gotta have people, which is gonna cost money. This is our conversation always about parking and charging for parking, and it takes employees to control and to facilitate that. And so I don't know if we're gonna be able to collect enough to make it worthwhile, and that's always been our challenge with that. So I think it's fine to talk about it, but I think that has to be taken into consideration.
I agree, and my only comment is it kind of Grinch-like. We have been told every year that I have been on this board, and I have heard at the 1 year I was not on the board, that we should cut costs. We should give things up. Well, okay, we're spending 15, 20 grand on stuff and nobody wants to charge for it. And okay, so let's cut it out.
I would prefer not to cut those things that benefit the members. And as far as this increase, I would like to hold the line at 12.5 for this year.
I think that's a good idea, Madam President.
Comments? I didn't hear.
Yeah, she didn't hear your comment.
I think that's a grand idea.
Okay. Sarah?
I think that these special events are actually really good for the community, and I support them, and I support doing more of them. I think it's a good way to bring our community together. I do feel like there are some fractures, and those kind of events help them. I also think part of Breakfast with Santa is a really good example. It's a whole event we do that's based on donations. So I think maybe we can leverage continuing events or doing more events with donations from the community, because I think there are a lot of people that do favor these community programs.
Okay, yeah, we're not spending for it.
Madam President, Andrew.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah. I think any way that we can increase our membership events, it would be really beneficial for everyone. And to your point, as long as they're free, I think we should keep that front and center. So I actually would be in favor of increasing the membership special events to 15,000.
Yeah. Okay. Emergency preparedness increased from 4,500 to 7,000. Explanation?
Well, this was based originally on that $1 per capita, which of course gets us to 7. Our budget, of course, is 4,500. We have now spent about 16 of it, I think. We spent about 16 of it. We still, General Manager and I were talking about the 1610 signs. They have been going up at the gate ingress stop signs. So I don't know what that does for gate 5, but anyway, keep your eyes out for them. But that's 6. We ordered 12 originally, so if we're going to do them to the 13 mailbox clusters and the 3 close to the right-of-way at Whatcom County, we'll have to purchase more. And as much as I would like to see the increase, given what's happened and the talk that we've had now, I would be very happy at 45.
Comments? Okay. All right, I'll leave it at 4,500 then. Recommend hazardous tree removal and pruning increase from $20,000 to $60,000 based on the volume of trees and emergent issues. 2019 budget of $20,000 was, couldn't touch it. Comments? This is a safety issue.
I'd like staff to comment.
Yeah, we choose the 20,000, it's about, Rich, about 2,000 a tree, I believe, to come down when we take them.
I can't tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's about 2,000.
About $2,000 a tree. So with $20,000, that gives us 10 trees.
We did a forester's report some, X number of years ago, and with that came the recommendation for certain trees, et cetera, that need to be taken down. Do you have any idea of a count? It's a big number.
Yeah, you have a big forest, we have a lot of forest here. I mean, you have trees that probably weren't on that study originally that now
Have
are
come
on.
down since then, yeah, but they become emergency trees.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
so, I mean, that's an ongoing issue that we're gonna have here. You know, trees that
Yeah.
we've taken down and trees that were originally on the list
Yeah.
are gone now, it's an ongoing, it's just a
The new
snowball.
ones come out.
Yeah,
All right,
Madam President, Carol, then Rich, then Eric, and then Sarah.
It seemed to me that one of the things we did at least last year was anytime a tree was brought to our attention, it became part of a group of trees that were evaluated by an arborist. It was ranked by 1 through 12. And last year, we made the decision to take down anything ranked an 8, which is to 12, which are the worst of the worst. So I guess it would help us to have a little bit of history. How successful was that? Do we have a similar, I mean, how many more do we have to deal with this year? How do we know that we're gonna need 60? Were there huge gaps in getting that done? The ones done that we felt absolutely needed to go? Just curious.
Madam President, Rich?
Yeah, to Carol's point, there is a ranking, and the evaluation should be based on the ranking as far as what kind of funds we need. The other thing everybody needs to be cognizant of is these are only the trees that are in Sudden Valley's right away. And yet, we've had owners here that are willing to pay to remove Sudden Valley trees that are hazardous or dangerous, that are close to their property. You know, myself being one, I paid for a couple of trees that belong to Sudden Valley, but the whole issue needs to be the ranking. And you need to take that ranking of those that are most hazardous today, or, you know, within the next couple of months, because it's changing constantly, and evaluate those costs to base this number on. That's my opinion. And Jessica can give us those numbers. She has the ranking sheet, so.
Madam President, Eric?
So this year, we have $20,000 available for the hazardous tree removal. How much of that has been expended so far, do you know, Jennifer?
I don't know off the top of my head, but if I recall, it's over half.
In a conversation I had with Jessica last month about hazardous trees, my understanding was that there's a batch of them that are going out to bid, and there would need to be a UDR request soon. And so that would indicate to me
That'll be
that-
coming next month.
That'll be coming, that's for, I do believe, Southern Court.
Right, and so if there's a UDR request coming, that means that we've blown through the 20.
Well, it means that a batch of trees that she has to remove will take us over that budget.
Right, and
Yep.
then that's by April in the year, we were there, because they were already going out to bid.
We had 2 additional UDR requests last year for hazard tree removal, so when the budget is brought forward, it will include a comparison back to 2015, and any funds that we expended out of UDR for, you know, whatever they were, will be combined with the regular operating fund, so you can see how much we spent in total and don't have to try to add those figures together yourself.
Thanks.
Madam President, Sarah, then Andrew?
That answered my question.
Madam President, Andrew?
Well, I think safety is the single most important issue that we need to identify for on behalf of our membership, and to that point, I think I'd rely on the GM's recommendation, and if that's the 60,000, then I'd be supportive of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody who has any,
I'll just add real quick, the forest ain't getting any younger.
yeah,
And we haven't done management forever. We desperately need to spend some money to take care of trees that will be hazardous.
yeah. When staff brings us the budget, if you include the $60,000, it would be good to attach to that a list of trees that the ranking on them is, you know, such that they are emergencies or, you know, really hazardous trees right now, justify the expenditure. Anything else? Eric?
I would say that we add to the required list a safety list, because this, I would say that if it's safety, it should be required.
Yeah, okay, in the ranking,
That's-
with the required one, then safety becomes right after that. What? Sure?
I guess my comment back to that is this falls under the same thing as snow removal to me. If we have a really bad windstorm that causes more of these, or something happens that causes it, we go to UDR. It's the same thing with if we have a really bad snowstorm, we go to UDR. So I don't think by not increasing it, or maybe not increasing it to 60,000, we're just not gonna deal with it. I mean, we will, and it would just come out of UDR. Some of this stuff is based on things we can't predict that will happen, emergencies, weather, wind, and I think that's a big reason why we have UDR. I mean, it's a good resource for UDR.
Who's up, Carol?
Yeah, Carol.
The only difference between the trees and the snow is typically this happens every year with the trees. And if we have a history annually that says this is how much we're spending, then it should be a line item in my mind. Whereas snow removal seems to be, you know, it skips years when it's really high. So hopefully we can consider that when we determine what to make that amount.
I'm feeling a comfort level with increasing to 60. Anybody else?
Madam President Larry, go ahead and call on me, Larry.
Yeah, Carol really took care of it.
Okay. Would you like to move on, Larry? Okay. Number 15, recommend $30,000 to join the Whatcom County Emergency Management Council as a partner. Gives us access to the Defense Department revitalization property list. Services for Whatcom Department of Emergency Management, including 1 full exercise, 2 tabletop exercises, et cetera, et cetera. Who wants to talk to that one?
I'll let Joe start, but I'd like to chime in if I may.
This was something that not only does it give us those exercises, but we also can tap into county resources for whenever we need something, i.e. snow removal, or if there's a windstorm or anything like that, we can tap into them and utilize their equipment and some of their information. So it could help us out again. We don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. It could be earthquake, it could be whatever.
If we had been part of this, could we have called them and said, send out some snow removal help?
No.
No.
Okay.
We might have been able to use, when we were running low on material, we could have probably got material a little quicker than what we did get, would be where that would come in. Correct,
Okay.
Michael?
That's correct. The problem with this is that right now we're not allowed. I'm not sure that we're working on being allowed. And I wish Norm Smith were here because he'll tell me how close we are, but whether it's going to happen in this or in the 2020 budget, I don't know for sure. And also we're trying to, I think right now the cost is actually 24 something or 25. We're trying to get it down to a reasonable number, if 15,000 would be considered reasonable. But yes, it would open a lot of doors for us. Yeah, I would like to see some money put in there, but I don't think you want to tie it to a line item. If it doesn't happen next year, then it sits there. So it's kind of a, I don't know.
I'm looking at some of the things that it would be included, a full exercise, 2 tabletop exercises. You've been doing those things anyway, right?
We have.
Okay.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we've been inviting them to our tabletop, which we are going to have another one in end of August, and they are already invited to that.
Comments?
Question, so we don't charge them $30,000 to participate in our exercise?
Yeah.
No, but that wouldn't be a bad idea, would it?
Yeah.
So you're saying it's possible that at this point, if we just pull this out, that if something comes up that we want to participate, we could look at a UDR or something like that. It doesn't have to be part of the budget.
I agree with that, yes.
Okay. So we cut number 15. 16, recommend SVCA pursue looking into running rec center food prep kitchen space in 2020. Comments?
What does that mean?
Downstairs.
I know, but what does that mean, run it?
Run it under Sudden Valley. Just something to look at. The hours down there are very limited, 10 to 2, Monday through Saturday. It's not open on Sundays. It's something to look at potentially for a revenue source.
I would suggest this not be part of the budget, but simply bring it to the board if there is a plan
Okay.
to do that,
Would-
okay?
But I know that we are not actually sponsoring the monies that are going to Africa through the endeavors of Ken, but if we were to run this ourselves, that would certainly dry up humanitarian effort. Something to think about.
Yeah, but again, it's not part of the budget.
Right.
It's a separate discussion. If something comes up, just bring it to the board with a plan if you have one. All right, and then down, number 18, Sarah, this one's for you. In each department, speak to where efficiencies have been gained or savings anticipated. For example, vehicle R&M costs should go down in 2020 if new vehicles are purchased in 2019. And this is just instruction to staff. Okay? Staff understanding what we've said in all of this. Okay. All right, now let's look at the capital list on the final page 7. And again, doing the estimate of 91% collections. Capital Repair and Replacement Fund. Okay, B, plan for 3 major facilities projects, spec design for design process of facility for the long-term enjoyment of the community, including community input, construction of spec, the reconfiguration of the Area Z maintenance building, the demolition and rebuild or refurbishment of Barn 8, refurbishment of the Clubhouse Interior. Include payments in 2020 for the SURF capital loan and any multi-year projects approved in 19. In other words, pay for what we've already approved. And include an amount for new capital, recommended new capital vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. Comments, where do we want to go with that? Carol?
This was discussed in finance. This has been a conversation that they've been having for a while, and this conversation came about because of the fact that we've got a number of long-term planning committees that are working on things. And the discussion came up in finance about what should the long-term planning committees expect that's already being done? Do we want them to deal with these kinds of issues, or should we begin something of this nature? If it's long-term planning, we wouldn't even start to do any of these things until 3 to 5 years from now. And the Finance Committee felt it was appropriate to start at least looking at the feasibility of some of these construction items in 2020, so we could look at what is appropriate and when would it be appropriate to construct. So primarily 2020 would be a year to evaluate
Okay.
and do spec designs.
So instead of adding anything into the SURF fund, we will just look at and evaluate in 2020 where we should be going forward. No? Okay, what are we saying then?
Yeah, I'm saying no, not quite, because if we're going to be doing spec designs, that is probably going to cost us something.
That would cost.
So
Funds.
we need to be conscious of that stuff as well. Area Z and what to do about this building have been talked about for years and were talked about thoroughly in the 10-year plan. That yes, while we didn't adopt the entire 10-year plan, we took a look at what was needed to deal with these issues over the next 10 years, and they required a certain amount of financial input to deal with existing assets that are at or well beyond their useful life now in this 50-year-old community. It's time to, I'll use the better phrase, fish or cut bait. You know, we're either going to not have a maintenance building because it's going to collapse around our people's ears, or we're going to fix it. And pretty much the same with this, although I am personally torn about this building because we really still yet don't know exactly, as well as I would like to know, how long we might expect to get out of this building. But finding that out is not free either. And I think we need to spend some money on finding that out. The clubhouse interior, I have been under the impression that that was something that was going to be done or should be done because the exterior had been done. But if we can put it off until 2023, then maybe that's more clearly a long-range plan. I don't know.
It's my understanding that as far as the administration building goes, doing the interior is not a cosmetic task.
That's right, it's not cosmetic.
There are furnaces and vents and all of this kind of thing that are failing, and that's what they are doing. And that is on this, the reserve list right now. So I don't know if we're willing to say that that is a task that, you know, should be done because we are expecting to do it, and it is not cosmetic. Every dollar that we spend in new furnaces and ducts and everything saves us operating money in, you know, heating the place and cooling it and so forth. As far as Area Z and the maintenance building go, I think that's another pretty well understood task, that building is in sad shape and needs to be replaced. When it comes to this building, there's a couple of steps to it. How long will it last? If we replace it, what do we want to put in that building? What's the size of the building? What's the function of the building, et cetera, et cetera? This building is not well understood yet. And I don't think that we can make a decision on this one for at least a year or more. And if you're looking at specs, how can you do specs for something that you don't know what you're going to do with?
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't think we can touch this building. Carol?
I think the one thing that the Finance Committee was clear about, first of all, these were things that were talked about from the SST, from the Committee of the Whole. This was like 2-3 years ago, we had this conversation originally. These were all top priority items that were suggested that we do.
Right.
The maintenance building may not collapse, but if anyone has been in it, the idea of working in that building, it's a shame that we have to put our employees
It doesn't
in that
function.
building. It's deplorable. I agree with getting some ideas about what to do with this building. And the Finance Committee said we need to start having the conversation so we get input as to what needs to happen. So if we keep postponing it, we will never get there.
Right.
We're not necessarily saying, oh, here's our deadline, we're going to get it done. We have to start doing the research, the evaluation, and start getting community input as to what to do, you know, and how to get it done. So that was the Finance Committee's reasoning for starting this conversation and getting some money set aside to start doing some of these things.
Just a small point of information, as far as surveys go, Town Square has a survey feature. So if that's, I know historically we've used SurveyMonkey for a fee, but we already pay for Town Square. So just as a point of information.
Good.
Yeah.
Madam President, Sarah.
I have no issues with the Area Z maintenance building. I think that we already looked at doing that. I mean, when Wilson was here, we did a lot of work when we were looking at the revitalization, and I feel like we've just thrown that stuff aside and we're just starting over. Because we did a lot of work. They did look at this building, and again, I've said it was structurally sound. So I'm not sure how we've gotten to this building needs to go. The thing that still doesn't make sense is, okay, Area Z, I mean, the maintenance building's in awful shape. Nobody disagrees with that. It has the same timeline as this building does. So that doesn't at all say to me that we're just starting to look and think about what we're gonna do with this building. If that's on the same timeline as the maintenance building, there's no question. The maintenance building has to come down and we have to do something different. On top of that, we've already done some work on what would that look like. So we need to leverage the money we've already spent and use that information. But I, again, do not agree with this building and having this timeline on it. I know we talked about it being on the reserve study for 2020. I think somebody already said it, a spec design, you're designing a new building. So that's not at the phase of, what are we gonna do? What's the timeline? What's the longevity? How much life does this building have? That's, we're getting rid of this and we're gonna design a new one for 2021. It's on the same timeline. I mean, if you're trying to say they're different, that makes no sense because the Area Z maintenance building, we're building a new building. Barn 8, this is set to build a new building as well. And I'm completely uncomfortable with the how we got to needing this building or having this one be a priority. The other thing I don't see on here is barns, the ice barn coming down. So I'm not sure if maybe that's just tied in
It's on the
with
budget for this
maintenance
year.
building.
It will
It's
have
in
to
this
this
year.
year.
Okay,
Yes, right.
okay, good. Okay, so I wasn't sure that was in the maintenance building or what. Okay, so that's good. Refurbishment of the clubhouse interior, that one's a little ways out, so I'm not sure why we're looking at that on here if it's just for, I guess, longer term plans, but obviously that's not gonna affect our 2020 budget. I think we're far from saying we need to do a spec design for Barn 8 in 2020. I don't disagree with looking at it. I know they didn't do a full study when we were here with Wilson and we were talking about the level they went into, but they went into enough detail to certify that it was structurally sound. So they did do some work and we did pay for that. So I would like to leverage that work and take more time to look at what can we do with this building and not move ahead with designing next year and constructing in 2021.
Other opinions? Okay, I'm hearing that we feel maintenance is a strong need, and perhaps that should go in for the spec design in 2020 and construction in 21. And as far as this building goes, I would push that out until we get more information. And the clubhouse interior, I would like to know more about the necessity of doing that and what are we, what are the problems that we are liable to come up with in there if we don't do the job. Carol?
To Sarah's point, we do have information from the revitalization, and we have a lot of reports, and that will be part of the evaluation. It was not intended, I don't remember us saying spec design, but it's in here, so I may have misunderstood, but definitely a feasibility study to start the conversation, and looking back at all the information that we had before. My notes weren't clear on this, so Jennifer takes very good notes though, so she may have captured this accurately, so.
That's just what I recalled from the conversation, that the finance committee asked that dates be put in for each of these items. The draft presented to the finance committee did not include dates, and that the dates they wanted to see were for spec design and construction. They asked what management recommended, and I gave them the dates that we that are in the reserve study as the recommendations.
Okay,
and so
good,
that's
that explains, yeah.
that's how I put that in there.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Larry?
Yeah, again, it's too early to make a decision about the barn, certainly too early to make a spec design,
Absolutely.
but I believe it is not too early to start reevaluating the work that Wilson's already done to ascertain the strength and viability of this building and to get a better picture of how long we can expect to get use out of this building. I do not want, I was there, I remember how it felt. I do not want this board or this community to get into the same situation with this building that we were in with Barn 7, where stuff was carried out and we had no clue how bad off it was, and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of material and man hours were wasted. Thankfully, it didn't come out of Sun Valley's budget, but that still was a huge avoidable waste, and I do not want us to get into that. I highly encourage us to start with what Wilson's already done and then expand on it and find out what is our lifespan in this building. And then we can push things out to future years maybe, but I would want that to be budgeted in 2020. And again, if the clubhouse interior, it's spec design in 23, I don't even know why it's on this sheet.
Yeah, as I said, I think that one should be pulled in. If I were to do year over year, I mean, I do maintenance next year, the interior of the administration the year after that, and then this building to perhaps in the third year.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I'd like staff to go find all of the engineering reports and everything that were done for this building and to see what the full picture is, not just pull one document out and say this is the answer.
Yes, correct.
Madam President, Sarah.
Just one follow-up. If the dates on here were put in based on what was in the reserve study, we already went through the reserve study pieces, and the date that's on the reserve study is because that's what management recommends. So it's not because the reserve study had that on there. We're the ones who put it on there per management's recommendations.
The reserve consultants will be on site in September to do their on-site evaluation for the next year.
Yeah. Eric?
With John?
Oh, yeah, and as I said before, the reserve study is a suggestion, and it calls to mind that we should do something, but it all depends on the condition of something. Like if it says that truck is due to be replaced this year, and I look at it, the truck is just fine, I'm not going to replace it this year. On the other hand, if I've got a truck that's falling apart, but it's not supposed to be, you know, according to the reserve study, replaced until 3 years from now, I'm sorry, I'm not waiting. So it's a way to keep track of our assets and suggested times to do upgrades to them.
Madam President Carroll.
Okay, so that's,
Madam President Carroll.
Carol.
I just wanted to mention that trucks are a little bit different situation than a building.
That's true.
And if we look at the reserve study and all of the work on this building that has been deferred because we did not have the funds for it, and we are now finding, we found out 2 years ago when we went through the whole revitalization piece, and this is what I hope will be brought up as we go through all of the documents, that to, for instance, replace the siding, we're probably also going to have to replace all the insulation. We don't know how much dry rot and mold is in that area. We start to do that. We're also going to have to add ADA, so we have code issues. This was a study that I know Wilson has done, and so even though it's in the reserve study as this year, a lot of things were to have been done in the past that we had to defer because we just didn't have the money to do it. And we now know that it's going to cost a lot more than we saw in the reserve study. So this is how we got to the point of having to replace, or looking at the possibility of replacing, because the cost to fix this building is going to be almost as much as replacing it, and it'll still be a 50-year-old barn.
Right.
So, but that will all be part of the documentation that we had from Wilson from 2 years ago.
Okay, roads. Roads, that includes culverts. The study that we have does show the cost year over year for roads and culverts together. As far as I'm concerned, this is a well-understood fund because it is part of the covenants, restrictive covenants. That's where it's called out. It said that we will have a plan and we will fund it. So I think that whatever our fund, our assessment from the engineer says is what we must do.
Agreed.
Disagreements?
That's exactly what the covenants say we have to do.
Okay.
The only thing I would want to make sure that our roads engineers take a look at, right now, our roads have dirt along the edge that goes up like
I think that they may
this.
fix that when they do the resurfacing.
Well, I don't know at all. Several things, and you mentioned resurfacing. One, how are we going to make sure water gets off the road and into the ditch if there's dirt that's sticking up above the edge of the road? Is that part of the plan to remedy or not? If it's not, we need to add it to the plan.
That's not a budget discussion.
Well, it is, because it's gonna cost money, and we need to know within the
When
context of the
staff brings
10-year
us the budget,
plan.
they will take that into account, right? Okay.
Okay, that's
To see if
number
it's a
one.
problem, okay.
And at some point, Joe, I'd love to know how the new paving is gonna be because it's supposed to be something you can just pour on and it'll level itself. How does it avoid dripping off the edges of the road, number one? And how do we put it on a steep road, number two? But that's not tonight.
Okay.
Mike, is it possible to do that?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay.
Hey, he's the expert.
Yes, he is. Carol?
I would like Mike to say what he thinks about the job that was done on Marigold, please.
Actually, and is Mitch still here?
No.
I know that he was, he headed the fact that all we had was that the trench was repaired, and Mitch was adamant that that's not how they were allowed to leave it. I think the people that came in to do that job did an outstanding job. The traffic is horrendous right there, especially because you have to shut down the boulevard for a period of time. I think they did a marvelous job, and the pavement is beautiful. If we could do that throughout all of Sudden Valley, boy, I would be tickled pink.
Yeah, I got to see pictures of that as they were milling that down. They did a real good job on that.
I did.
They did a really good job on it.
Okay, now the mailbox fund. Oh, how far back was this? I don't know.
Jennifer, I thought that after we purchased the mailboxes that we found, I'm gonna say on eBay, but we found them somewhere and bought them, and we still have them kind of pushed aside someplace, that we took that, there's about $4,000 left, and didn't we take it out of that fund and stick it somewhere?
No, that's not my reading of the original measure. I found the original measure, and my reading of it is that the money must stay in the mailbox fund. However, I'm not an attorney, and so we'll need to get a legal opinion on if the membership needs to vote to transfer the funds to SURF, like they did from the board density reduction fund to SURF, or if it was a member density reduction. That's a whole different topic. Or if the board can just vote to mingle those funds.
How much is in that fund?
$5,000.
5,000 or something, okay. All right, yeah, and the membership did vote to collect the money to put up the cluster boxes, et cetera, and stated that, I believe, the remainder, if it wasn't spent, would be used for update, maintenance, et cetera. And I mean, that's how much one cluster costs. So if we lose anything, or we need to, increase the number of boxes or whatever, that money will quickly go away, and then we will actually have to take it out of SURF or whatever after that.
Well, there's actually another small issue with that. I mean, you can spend all the money that's in there to date, but there's still people that owe that due. And so it's not a lot. It's very little, about $3 a month that comes in. But it just keeps coming in.
So it has to go there.
And so it's just this little, it's just like a
15 years.
thorn that just needs to be decided on and
If we can write off
fixed.
bad debts,
It's dues, and we typically don't write off dues.
yeah, all right.
Okay. But we are collecting new mailbox funds, and those new mailbox funds that we're collecting starting on January 1st, that's a board designated fund, and so the board could vote to commingle those funds all into SURF and stop the separate mailbox assessment going forward, and that would just be a board motion, because
Okay.
it's not a member voted item.
Yeah, and I would be interested in hearing the attorney's opinion on whether we can commingle the original, or if we just spend it down and get rid of it that way. Comments?
The only thing that was not covered in here is the potential, not decided yet, but the potential for a rainwater utility charge to Sudden Valley. It would go into effect in 2020, only at 50% of whatever the full level is. The trouble is that it hasn't been decided yet, and there's no way of knowing exactly what the county council is going to do about that.
When is that vote coming?
Right now, the vote is anticipated to be in June.
So when we find that out, it will be included in the budget.
I guess so. If
And
that's good enough, then
one of
that's
these
what we'll
things
have to do.
that's, you know, mandated by the government, so.
Right, that would be
Along with the
required.
rest of our
Yeah.
taxes, et cetera, okay.
Good enough.
All right, I think that we have pretty well gone through this whole thing. We have specified to staff what we believe are mandatory items, what are things that we would like to see done differently, and explaining that some things, if they are included, need to be thoroughly justified, and the board may not even agree to it at that point. Anything else? Final statements? I think, and again, this is to explain, this is not the budget. These are the guidelines that we are giving to staff to create the budget. And you do have the sense of the board. Okay. Anything else? All right, property owner comments.
Mary McIntosh, 3 Whistling Swan. I may have missed this, but on the agenda, it said that you were going to discuss getting vehicles for the new staff members. And I loved that you said that you would like to really look at not increasing the staff at all. And so I'm hoping that that also means that these cars will not be purchased. Okay. It's D on
Okay,
page
all right.
7.
If there's nobody to drive it,
What?
if there's nobody to drive it, you don't need it, right?
Well, right, exactly,
All right.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for that to come up and it didn't. Anyway, so good for the community was something that we talked about with, or you guys were talking about with the special events and stuff. And I wanted to just say, I fully agree. I actually think special events are a wonderful part of any neighborhood. And I think that, even though I don't have small children, or I probably won't go to the events, honestly, I still think that they're wonderful, and I think that it's an important thing that you guys should do. And I wanted to just kind of, because Sarah was saying that, I wanted to say that I agree. I know that everybody I talked to does agree. Like, that is something that I think matters a lot. And then you were talking about the discretionary fund from the GM, giving small thank yous to staff, which I totally also agree that does make a big difference. But also, the community needs, we want you guys to care about how we feel also. And I think that a lot of times that's been lacking. And so in some little ways, little things like special events and things like that does matter. With this huge dues increase, it would be really nice to have events and stuff where you can go and meet your neighbors and talk to people and have a hamburger or, whatever for the kids. And then I wanted to say also the grant writing position. I know that I got a lot of pushback from the community because I brought up the fact that the Sofield, North Point Park, all of our property is open to the public. And if we think about partnering with the county or partnering with, the water district and stuff, I just think that that's going to bring the public to Sutton Valley more so than it does. And if we don't want a lot of people here from all over the place, then I think that having that grant writing position is opening that door even more than it already is open, because it already is open to everyone. And people don't know that. And I think that that's just something to consider when it comes to adding that additional position on. And then I just have one question of which park is being worked on this year. Last year it was Huckleberry Park, and I have no idea what this year is, because the parks, which for kids is a really big deal. I think it's good for market value. I think it's good for the community to feel good about this place and feel good about the dues increase. But I haven't heard anything about which park is being worked on.
There is a decision on that, isn't it, Eric?
Yeah, Maple Leaf Park.
Maple Leaf.
Maple Leaf?
Maple Leaf.
Yeah, okay.
I don't even know where that is.
Okay.
It's, it's over on,
Harborview?
Harborview Drive.
Okay,
Beautiful park,
okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
well loved.
Joshua Bowen, 17 Stable Lane. First, I just wanted to say thanks. It's such a small thing, but it looks like someone cleaned off the sign on gate 9. I'm not sure if any of the other ones were done. The large sign, the little sign, you go out there, it's like nice and good looking, so that's really cool. Second, you guys were talking about the trees. I'm pretty sure most of the community would agree with you that the more invested in that, the better. Just the other day I was on Strawberry Trail with my kid, and there was a tree there that's marked. I'm not sure if it was taken down yet, but that bad boy is coming down soon. So that's probably something that should be addressed quickly, if I was in your position. Third thing, the community events, I think we can all agree that that's awesome. You know, $2 for whatever, for people that work here, for their perks and stuff like that. I'm sure no one would disagree with that. I think
That's a
the
year.
issue, yeah, the issue would be like, you know, another 2, another 8, another 16 or whatever after the big dues increase. That starts to sour, and you know, I've only been here for 8 or 9 months, and I can tell that some of the community morale is pretty low as well. So, you know, I think that's one thing to focus on as well, since you mentioned morale. The last thing I wanted to say is, you know, I'm just kind of throwing a lot of stuff out here right now. It's weird standing up. There should be a sit down for people who are not used to this kind of stuff. But you know, there's so many committees for everything, and one thing that, you know, I'm sure you guys have discussed it, but I feel like there should be a committee for marketing, and I'm not sure how that works with the golf pro and what they're doing there, but, you know, from my perspective, being in that industry, I look at stuff that could be done a lot better. All around, for golf, for here, because, you know, we want residents here, and I think that would be something that would be worthwhile to look into, because I think Whitney is a marketing person.
Yes.
And, you know, there's other people in town that could probably, I know I would, you know, dedicate some of their time to being on a committee like that to try to help out where, you know, because we talk about golf and we talk about, oh yeah, it made this much, but the cost to do it is this much, and we kind of celebrate that small victory, but this other thing isn't happening. So whatever, you know, there's so many other options that can be taken place from a marketing perspective with the golf course and with other things that are happening here, and it's something that I would suggest you guys take a look at.
Thank you. Board. I mean, there's no other audience out there, right? Board? Nothing? No comments? Would anybody like to,
Call to adjourn.
second, all in favor?
All in favor?
We'd be done at
9:18.
9:18. Okay, we're good.